Hi students, welcome to another episode of Women of FHSS. Today joining us, we actually have one of our own BYU professors joining us today, Leslie Hadfield. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I was hoping we could get started this conversation about your story, who you are and how you got to where you are. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Logan, Utah, actually River Heights, if you know that area. And I was born and raised within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm the middle child. I share the middle position with my younger brother. So I'm 3 of 6, and I went to Utah State University. And then after that, my educational career went to Ohio University and then for a master's and then a PhD in African history at Michigan State University. So I've had some experience in the Midwest, which I enjoyed as well. And I did history all the way through, and then African history for my master's and PhD. My specialty is South Africa. So I was in South Africa on a study abroad program through BYU just over 20 years ago. I went as a junior in college, and that changed my life. I didn't know it was going to, but it did. And so I ended up studying South African history, and the people I met there are still part of my life, and the family that I stayed with I still consider them my family, and I'm still in touch with them. So that was a great part of my life. So South Africa is a big part of me. Utah is a big part of me. When I graduated with my PhD, I got hired at BYU. And since then I've been teaching here. I'm also the Africana Studies coordinator in the Kennedy Center. So as on top of my work in the history department, I do that work as well. And I am very excited about the major publications I've had. My book, Liberation and Development, Black Community Programs in South Africa. And then just had another book come out, A Bold Profession, African Nurses in Apartheid South Africa.
Oh my goodness, congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you.
So last time you and I spoke, I think that we were in an administrative meeting and there was a project going on back east. And I think that some of your research has actually taken you to different places around the United States to gather information. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I have gone to different archives. I'm trying to remember which project I was talking about then. Most of my archives have been in South Africa, but yeah, there are times when I've, I might have been in Boston. I was going to a conference in Boston. Okay, yeah, that was probably it. And there's a great African Studies Center at Boston University, so I have contacts there. I also have some family history in the Boston area, and so I can't remember if this was at the same time, but the last time I was in Boston, which was November of 2019, I went a day early to the conference so I could drive to a cemetery where my great-grandfather was buried. No, it was my great-great-grandfather was buried there.
That's amazing. Yeah, I heard rumors that you were helping with trying to help immigrants into the United States find some genealogical research just based on the projects that you were doing during slavery in the United States or something. There was some kind of connection there, right? Yeah, so you've been involved in a lot of work, I think, when it comes to that research as well, right?
Right, so that particular research, I have connections to people who are involved in that, but I haven't necessarily, I've taught a class on slavery in Africa and the Atlantic, and some of my former professors at Michigan State who I did meet with, usually at these conferences, the African Studies Association conference that I went to, they, yes, were involved in creating this database and websites and just gathering all this information from those records that can help pinpoint where people were and what their names were and who they were.
That's huge. That's a really big project. That's really neat that you've been able to be involved in that, as well as all of the other studies and research that you've done on your book. So That's really incredible. What was it that drew you to this, and what was it that helped you navigate through these decisions that you made? It sounds to me like, I mean, did you start knowing that this is where you would end up? Did you start your undergrad experience knowing that this is where you would end up?
No, it wasn't. In fact, I remember receiving an email from a professor when I was at Utah State, and I noticed that she sent it after 10 p.m. And I remember thinking, I would not want that job because I don't want to be sending emails after 10 p.m. at night. I guess what? That's me now. I usually don't send emails after 10 p.m. at night, but yeah, I didn't start out. I really wanted to, I loved history. I started out as a business major, and I really wanted to do something that was going to be exciting and practical at the same time. And even when I switched my major to history, I still believed that I could find something that was more practical, not academia, not in education. But the more I got into it and went through the program, I realized that um, that's where my talents lie and my opportunities as well. And after teaching at BYU, I was fortunate to have a job right after graduation. And I realized this is my dream job. I didn't know it before, but this was my dream job. So it was kind of a long process. It was a journey for sure.
And it seems to me like it wasn't necessarily something that was linear, right? It's almost like you had to do certain things in order to grasp onto certain ideas and then follow those paths. So can you lead us through maybe the faith that played an active role in your decision making and what helped you to make some of those decisions?
Sure. So like I said, I started as a business major. My family, I come from a working class family. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go off and do an exciting internship and get into some business, go live in an exciting city somewhere. And in my first class, so part of it is trial and error, right? That's an important part of it, gathering information. And sometimes it's experiential information or experiential gathering of information. In the first class in the business program, I realized that I was not enjoying it, and I wondered if I could have 4 years of classes like this. And so I looked at the history classes. They all excited me except for one. I don't know what it was about the one, but all of them, I wanted to take all of them. And so then I decided, well, I want to enjoy my college experience. Let me major in history, and then I can minor in business. And eventually, it didn't take long for me to drop business altogether. I minored in political science. And so that was part of just learning more about myself. And I think I've really become more grateful about those experiences where you really have to try some things out. And that's why internships, study abroad programs, they are so important. So I was following some of my dreams and passions when I did the study abroad program to South Africa. It required me to figure out how to put my scholarship on hold, go through BYU. I had to take a prep course even when I was living in Logan. So I would travel 2 hours twice a week to the course. But it was totally worth it. And like I said, I went there thinking I was going to have this great adventure and then come back and just continue on the path I had already laid out, which was at that point, then I was with my history and political science education, I was going to go work for the federal government somewhere. That was my plan at that point. So I always had a plan, but it often changed. Well, at least at that point. And then I came back and it was much harder to leave South Africa than I had anticipated because of the relationships that I made with people. And so when I came back, I wondered, what do I do with this experience? I ask my students often to think about, BYU the aims of a BYU education are to change us, to affect us as an entire person, as a whole person. And this is kind of what I was thinking about. How can I have this experience? What does this mean for my life? More than just this fun adventure. And I then decided to do graduate school, and I wanted to continue to engage with Africans and with Africa. It was not an easy decision after that. I struggled at times to decide. I had some big decisions to make when I was finishing my bachelor's and deciding on master's programs. And then again, after my master's program, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a PhD. I was burned out with school. And I can give some more detailed information on those decisions. But one of my guiding principles came from a combination of, I think, an institute class and some other church lessons. I'm not entirely sure how I came up with this, but I know a lot of the ideas came from church lessons. And that was this formula that I created for myself. How was I going to use my talents and my opportunities to make the world a better place? I wanted, if I was going to be working in some place for 8 hours a day, I wanted it to mean something. And I was privileged to be in a position that I could choose a job or a profession that was meaningful. And so I do acknowledge that some people don't have those kind of choices. They just need to take what they can get, and they can be pretty terrible jobs. So I appreciated that, but it was still really hard. And there were times when there were, a couple of questions in mind. One, I wanted to know that God wanted me to go in the direction that I was going in. And there have been times in my life where I've had some really important confirmations that what I was doing was what God would have me do. But oftentimes when I was making those decisions, it was unclear. And I think God wanted me, it's just, I think how it works, He wanted me to make that decision and trust me to make decisions. And then if I made the wrong decision, then He would help me out because He knew I was trying, right? So there were a lot of times when I was kind of, I would say, racked with uncertainty and in making these decisions. And one of the things too, that when I had finished my bachelor's, I'd gone to South Africa again as a student facilitator for the program. I came back, I was unemployed. I didn't know I was going to go to school. And I was trying to decide. I'd been admitted to 2 programs, one a Master's of Public Administration, the other the Master's in History. So very different programs, different places. And I, like a lot of good Mormon girls, I also had the goal of getting married and having children, being a mother. And so I had this realization once when I was coming out of the temple with some friends at that time. And I thought it would have been really nice for me to have a partner in life at that point to help me make these decisions. But then it struck me that just like those experiences that teach us who we are and what we enjoy, this was a time where it was an opportunity for me to figure out for myself what I wanted and where I needed to go. That formula of my talents, my opportunities, and making the world a better place. So that's kind of the overall path. And maybe you have some follow-up questions about some specifics.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you talked about how sometimes when you were racked with indecision, that you had to develop a formula that worked for you in order to move through that process of indecision. And because I think that, a lot of students that we see in student support offices and even in offices with faculty is that we're so worried about this good, better, best, so much that it's crippling. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to, how you were able to arrive to that conclusion, because I don't know that that's necessarily the formula, right, for every single person. So what was it about this journey that helped you to gain confidence in that formula for yourself?
Yes, thank you for that question. So part of it is, I think, just some of my own, what I believe is important, right? But also, I'm sure the Spirit helped guide me in that. And I was just remembering this talk that the bishop of the ward I was in at this time when I was trying to decide to do a master's degree or where to do the master's degree. that's the time I was really racked with indecision, right? What do I do? What do I want? And part of it I realized later was that I was trying to make decisions on things that were unknown and fears that I had. And one of the things that this bishop, when he was speaking, said was, sometimes we just need to make a decision and go in a direction, and the Lord is going to work with us wherever we go. And I remember driving home from church and my roommate saying, so are you going to make a decision now? they said they were thinking about me when he said that. And it really did help for me to have that faith that, you know what, if I'm doing what's right, if I'm going in the wrong direction, the Lord will help me, or if I'll just make my life better wherever I go, right? And it may not be a huge mistake if I go to Ohio versus staying in Provo or wherever it is. I think things will work out. And so that helped me. And also just there was one other point I was going to make that was just on my mind. let me try to remember. Oh yes, one thing that helped me, that my father really would help me with these, is to think about what decision would leave the most options open. So let's say you can't decide between one or two, and so okay, you got to decide somewhere. So let's take that decision if it can help maybe open up that other decision later on. And that was one thing that helped me with this. And part of that too is recognizing when that is the case, right? A lot of people talk about doing a pros and cons list, and there are times when writing things out is really helpful, and you can ask for the Spirit to guide you when you're writing things out. But one of the things that I add to my pros and cons list is things I don't know, information that I need, and things that I think will happen if I take a certain decision, but are not necessarily the case. So one of the things that I was worried about is going to Ohio. There was a small population of members of the church. What is that going to do for me? Or Michigan State. And I actually felt like I had more dating opportunities in Michigan than I did in Utah. So it just kind of depends on where is your place. And it's hard to know those things without doing them in a lot of times. I'll just share one more experience too, if that's okay. When I was doing my PhD, I was at the end of my first year. I was asked to be the Relief Society president of our student ward, and I also I was going to do research in South Africa for 5 weeks, and then I needed to do another language program, and I had two options. I could go to Tanzania for a language program, or I could stay in Indiana. Go to Indiana for the program. And I really worried about it, and I decided that I should stay in the United States for the program. There were a number of reasons for that. I didn't know certain things about funding. So I decided to go to Indiana. Also, I thought it would be closer for me to come back to Michigan for the weekends for the Relief Society calling. And it turns out, I don't know if this is the case, but I kind of thought that God was saying, nope, you need to go to Tanzania. And so it turns out the program that I had applied for in Indiana, they said, we don't have enough students to have this advanced class that you applied for, but you can take the funding and go to the program in Tanzania.
Oh my goodness, wow.
So I ended up doing that, and 11 years later, I went back to the same area in Tanzania, and I think it was a really good thing for me to have that experience in Tanzania for a number of reasons. So I just felt like, okay, I made a decision with the best information I could have, and God made it happen how it needed to happen.
Exactly. And I love that. I love that example, because I think, again, when students, or even just people in general, are stuck with some really, the choice of two really good decisions, that you don't get too far down one road before you're asked to go down another road. Right. And I think that that's a perfect example of a situation where you made a choice and then And then the first choice became an option as part of your second choice. I think that that's really amazing. And I find that that's actually quite typical as I'm sitting here reflecting my own personal experiences. So one thing that you said that I wanted to follow up with was this idea of, you and I've talked about this idea of, I have this trajectory in mind for my life when it comes to dating and marriage and motherhood. And I love this idea and I love this plan and I know that it's part of my path. And so you were making decisions based on that very strong desire to fulfill that part of your life. Can you maybe talk us through how that's maybe shifted, or how you've been shaped as you've thought about your individual goals and then opportunities for those individual goals? Like, have you had to reprioritize or rethink those opportunities, and what has that looked like for you?
Okay. So yes, I think that like many young women in the church, when you graduate with no marriage prospects, it can be kind of daunting. You think, wait a second, this was, I was taught growing up, even though I had my plans, right? And I was secretly hoping that I wouldn't get married until I was 25. And now that seems so young to me. But I wanted to go and have my adventures, right? But I also did want to do that. And everybody has their own journey. So there are some who it's the right time for them to be married before they finish their education, and they finish their education while they do these other things. And then there's that balance act. But for me, I think thinking about my talents and my opportunities and how I can contribute to the world, as I also consulted my patriarchal blessing and tried to figure this out and tell God that I wanted to do what he wanted me to do, or what was the right thing, I realized that there's some work for me to do. And while being a mother and having a family is really important, I had experiences, and some of these came after I'd already made these choices, but I had experiences that confirmed to me, as I said before, that no, this is what I envisioned you doing, and we will all be held accountable for those things, I believe. And I think that again came through my patriarchal blessing, that idea that I will be held accountable for what I do with what I've been given, right? And so I then and I think, it was difficult for me to decide to do a PhD, but after my first year, as I saw some pieces coming into place, I felt the excitement for this program and what I was doing. I felt there's a bigger purpose. And even later in life, I felt, if it was needful for me to have had 7 children, then, I was doing I was doing my best. I believe God would have made that happen or helped that happen. But I'll just share this one experience. So one of the phrases in my patriarchal blessing that it's kind of funny. I went back later and realized, I think that could be describing history. It says that I will be have an influence through the writings of stories and events, and also talks about me having the gift of knowledge and my intellect and the assimilation of facts. So after my first year, I believe it was at BYU, I went to do a research trip in South Africa, and I asked my father for a father's blessing before I went. And he, in the blessing, said something to the fact that I would have a knowledge or be able to see myself as God saw me. And there was a moment when I was in the archive. I was a little bit in a rush. I didn't have a lot of time in the archive, so I was quickly deciding with this. It was a big book of minutes of meetings from a hospital record, and this was part of my research for the second book that I had published. And I was trying to decide, do I take notes on this? Do I take a picture of it, a copy of it? And just in that moment, it was as if time froze and I was looking down on myself. And there I was, assimilating facts. And this picture of the history was emerging in my mind as I was going through all of this information. And to me, that was, in a way, a confirmation that, that's the work that God had for me to do. And so to have faith in that, and I think that there are some women who have children more earlier in life than I have, and they still need to figure out what their work is, even with that motherhood. No, except I just going back to the question that you asked, I don't know how, if I was directly answering that, but just that, you think about, there is a mission for us. And sometimes I lose faith in that, but I do believe there is, and there are times when that comes back to me and I'm reminded. And so having faith in that, and having a big picture of what that could be, and it could be multiple roles that you have at different times in your life. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and there's another question that you had shared with me beforehand, and this is kind of related to that, how there are different places in our career where we have to make decisions or take a different approach. Some people, it could be changing jobs or even careers. In my own career in academia, once I've achieved certain things, then I've had to decide, okay, where am I going now? Am I going to go more into administration? Do I focus on this for my research? Do I go with this project? And so throughout our lives, that's going to be the case. And I've seen my own mother, she stayed with us at home until that was not a possibility anymore. She had to work, and now she has different experiences, and she's a working woman as a grandmother. And it just reminds me of a friend of mine who is a professor in a medical school in Colorado. And when she had her first child, she said she saw all the different important roles that women played in that, in her child's birth. It was an at-risk pregnancy, and the child was born a little bit early because there were some complications. And all of her doctors and nurses were women, and they saved her child and herself in that experience. And then she went home, and the women in her ward helped take care of her and her family when they came home, and had to deal with the aftermath of that difficult birth. And so she talked about how you can see women have all sorts of different roles. And when we open ourselves up to those, then there are a lot of possibilities for us.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I think sometimes you're right. We forget as individuals and as women that our roles are not dictated by others. It's this very inspired, very guided journey for each of us, and that there will be choices that we have to make. But at the end of the day, we're just asked to walk with faith that those roles will become more clear, and hoping that each of us have the opportunity to have an archive moment where we can see ourselves and the roles that we're playing through the lens of our Heavenly Father. What a beautiful and inspirational story that is, that we can each clarify if we don't know, right? That we can each receive that clarity for our own lives. That's really remarkable.
Right. And sometimes it does take moving in a direction to find out if that's the right thing.
I love that. Thank you. Do you feel that there are any aspects of your identity that have positively or negatively impacted your ability to move forward with your goals? And if so, this is a little bit more real of a conversation, I think. If so, what are you doing to overcome, or what have you done as a result of those experiences?
Yeah, that has really got me thinking, that question. I think a couple of things come to mind right away. one, my connections, and sometimes it just kind of happens, right? Connections that I've ended up having because I'm a woman or because of where I went to school. So that becomes part of my identity, right? Then that's opened doors for me. I think this research I did with all these retired nurses who were all women, I was able to ask them questions that a man wouldn't have been able to ask or do it well anyway. And so that I think has opened up doors. I think at the same time, there are ways that being a woman or being women does hinder and make certain things more difficult in, I think, in careers. And so there have been times when I've realized, wow, this has been a really stressful work situation. I don't think I'm being treated similarly because I'm a woman, right? And I also look younger than I am. I have a soft voice. And so that at times means that some people don't take me as seriously, which is really frustrating for me. It's part of my personality to be a little, I wish I could be more forceful, right? And then there are times when I think I wish that my career goals, well, and this is the thing is, I'm not sure if who I am as a professional woman has made any difference in my personal goals of having my own family. I'm sure it has definitely restricted the kind of potential partners in life that I might have. But at the same time, it's who I am. And so I can't change that. And eventually it comes into play anyway in a relationship if that's not going to be a part of it. And so, yes, I mean, there have been times in some relationships that the other person was intimidated by my accomplishments, and that played a role. And then there are other times where it attracted people to me. And so, yeah, there's that. I'm trying to think of other things about my identity. Being a member of the church helped me get hired at BYU, right? So my religious identity. And I didn't have any other job opportunities when I was on the job market. So I was grateful for that. And things here have been pretty good since I got hired. So I'm really grateful for my job. I'm not sure what else to say, but
I think that's great. I think it's important for women to understand that there are multiple identities that make us who we are. You know, our religious identity, our gender identity. And so I think that that's a really important thing to demonstrate. And that's what I'm hearing. And your professional identity and your personal identity, your identity, your marital status identity, right? Like there are all these different things that make you unique and individual. And I think that that's a really important thing to demonstrate to our student body or those who are listening in, is that there are multiple identities that we have. They all mesh together. One is not better than the other, right? They make us whole. And so I appreciate that you defined that when you were responding to that question of here's some real things that I've had access to because of who I am, and things that I haven't had access to because of who I am, whether or not that's systemic in nature or whether or not that's, you know, where we are as a society. And I think that those are really important kind of reality checks as we move forward in moving toward those goals and opportunities. So I'm really glad that you mentioned them. Thank you.
I also am so grateful for all the women who've come before me that have opened that up. And when I first got to BYU, it just really hit me as I was walking across campus one day, thinking about all the women who worked in their departments as the only woman. And there are some who've done that even a few years ago, right? And yes, I'm really grateful for them showing the way. And I think we're learning more and more as women and society the different roles that women can have and have multiple times, but also the limitations to that. So
that's great. Thank you. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, Leslie, is there anything else that you feel would empower our women students to pursue whatever they choose post-graduation, whether it's fulfilling grad school opportunities, higher education, stay-at-home opportunities, part-time or full-time employment opportunities?
Well, one of the things that came to mind as we were just talking just now is that it is part of my personality that if somebody tells me that I need to do something, I want to do the opposite thing, or not maybe the opposite, but I want to, if they say I can't do something, I want to prove that I can do it, right? And that's not always the case. I think if I know the reasons behind guidelines and rules, then I will follow them. So I'm not at heart a rebellious, well, I don't know, maybe I am. So I guess one of my pieces of advice would be to not let people tell you you can't do something or can't be something. And I think that's what we've been talking about as well, right? That there are so many opportunities, and sometimes it takes trying it out to figure out who you are and what talents you have. And other times it takes some prayer and introspection and then courage to move in directions that will bring the most benefit. And I think with that, a lot of things that have been the hardest things I've done in life have been the most worth it. They've shaped me the most. They've made my life so rich. And looking back, I really am blessed that I don't have regrets. Of course, there are times I've made mistakes and wish things would have gone differently, but overall, I'm really happy with the way things have gone, and I'm really grateful for that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your advice, and I hope that those listening in can really internalize the messages today. And Leslie, thank you so much for your time and for your talents and bringing those to BYU on subjects that are really important for us as individuals to understand. So thank you so much. Okay, so we're back on, everybody, because now we're talking about some really important things. So we're talking about the things that we wish that we would have known. So go ahead,
Right.
Leslie.
I forgot about this when I was talking about those times when it was so hard to make a decision because I wanted to do the right thing and for my life to work out the way it should. And I was afraid of making a big mistake, right? Taking it off course. And afterwards, I thought about what would I wish somebody would have told me at that time. And I wish somebody would have said to me, you know what, it might take some time to figure this out, but you're going to figure it out and it's going to be great. And you're going to be fine.
It's almost like they were giving you permission, right? Like they were giving you permission to just say, no, this is actually part of the process. And here, let me instill some confidence in you and your abilities to make choices.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. I love that piece of advice. I'm glad that we came back on so that we could talk about it. Thank you.